Hey everyone, it's Kate Stillman with Katie Silcox, Shakti School, Ayurveda School. We're going to talk about Ayurveda and healing and spiritual repair and whatever else we decide to talk about. So let's start with let's start with the idea of spiritual repair. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I have to give credit to one of my friends and mentors, Crystal Mortensen, who introduced this term to me, spiritual repair. Because as we have just left the Christmas season, there's this sense I'm sensing amongst many of the people in our school and that I interface with, even in like the friend realm, there's something of a hesitancy in many of us of our generation around spirit and religion. And I think there's this need to do spiritual repair on our past experiences of religion, whether we be Christian, Jewish, even Buddhist, Hindu. We all have grown up in these.
How about scientism? I'll throw scientism in there.
Sure. I mean, whatever, Moonies, whatever cult, whatever mindset that we are a part of. I know for me, like I loved so many aspects of my Christian upbringing, and they still really serve me on my spiritual journey. But there's a lot of, to be quite frank, trauma amongst many of our religious experiences. And yet, on the other hand, I think we're like starving for a connection to something bigger than ourselves and our egos and our sense of solitude and our individuality. And so one of my practices right now is learning how to reconnect with the spirit world in this very real way that feels as real as you and I sitting here together.
Yeah, I'm so in there with, I mean, on the scientism front, because like science is such a religion of our time, and it's so reductionist, it's so not healing. We also want to talk today about how Ayurveda uses this 5 kosha model, meaning that we've got these 5 bodies, these 5 sheaths around consciousness, and when one of them is blocked, or if one of them is not accessible, it throws off the whole game. It throws off what potentiality, human potentiality is all about. And I'm just seeing it so much. And I mean, with doing all the research I've been doing with chronic inflammation and wild habits, it's like there's all this ancient wisdom that we know what works for human beings. Like we know how to thrive, and we know that communing is important. We know how we gather is important. We know time apart and how we're in silence and how we focus alone is also just critical to human health, right? And into thriving. And yet in this day and age of someone has a lot of symptoms and is sick, right? And they feel sick and they go to the doctor with their symptoms, and the doctor, because the doctor's in the realm of scientism, the religion of science, right, is like, here's your options. You can be on these medications, right? And medications are, I mean, right now in the US, it's 66% of the adult population. 27% of children and adolescents have a chronic disease at this point and are being steered towards medication. That it's like there's no soul, there's no spirit in medicine with that. And that's not how it was. And not too long ago. I mean, even like the grandmother's touch and the grandmother's presence, right? With healing, the wise woman of the tribe, the midwife, and even the old doctors, the ancient doctors who would sit bedside, right? Would sit with you, would be with you. That commune and connection, the soul of medicine is just gone.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about one of our students from a couple years ago as an MD. She was my MD in Virginia. I don't think she'll mind me mentioning her name is Beth. And she did Shakti school, and my God, man, like that woman has so much soul. And she was there for me in a really fucked up period of my life where I couldn't sleep. And now I know that I was suffering from the effects of unprocessed trauma. But at the time, I didn't have a frame of reference for that, even within the yoga and meditation and Ayurveda community. And she sat beside me, and something came out of her that I think is always there, that was the soul of medicine. I think that I kind of in my brain do a division between people who get into, as you call scientism and allopathic medicine, because of their heart and wanting to help people because they have gone through something themselves, or people that want to make mommy and daddy happy and make a shit ton of money and fulfill some sort of social, right, cultural, like hierarchical status. And I do believe, and I know you agree with me, Kate, because I know you well enough to know that there's both. And I lament and mourn the way in which doctors are not given the full spectrum that Ayurveda, as the root mother medicine of reality, offers us. And at the same time, I mourn as well the naturopaths and Ayurvedic practitioners that are so dogmatic. And, I've had a lot of like Ayurveda shaming come at me in the past, and I have had to kind of digest that and know. And this kind of leads into what we were talking about before we got on the call. This is called the trauma vortex. When we polarize, whether it be in medicine, in society, whether it be dealing with coronavirus, whatever, right? Sexuality, all these things, when we polarize and it's either this black or white way, we know that we are in the limbic brain. That's what it does. So we know we're being dragged into this trauma vortex that looks to create concrete solutions to very difficult problems, such as chronic inflammation, such as dealing with coronavirus, such as a human relationship. Hello, the most difficult thing in the world. We seek to have some sort of stability in that rather than admit the freaking truth, which is we're super fragile and resilient, right? But like, we're delicate. We're Pema Chodron calls it.
Fragile or sensitive? What's your from trauma? We're fragile. I
No,
get that.
no. What I mean by that is the mortality of the human being is a thing, no matter how much these longevity people want to,
Yeah, yeah,
that we are delicate
yeah.
and super resilient and incredible. I mean, we are going to be the coronavirus generation. Like our children, when we're partying 2 years from now, when the Great Gatsby era hits 2 years from now, and we're doing salsa dancing in the streets, our kids are going to be like, dude, those homies went through the coronavirus. Like they did this, and so we are resilient. But I think there is a part of us that's the collective that so desperately wants daddy government or daddy medicine or daddy Ayurveda to tell them what is real. And it's denying this part of us that actually does not know. And that's a really scary place to be. And yet, to your point earlier, that's where potentiality sits. It's where creativity sits. It's where our chakras can actually open when we're in that place of, I don't know. I'm a very analytical, left-brained person. I like to know how it works. If something's wrong, I'm going to fix it. I want to research it. I want to understand it. I do not like being in the place of I don't know. And yet, the more I let myself be there, the more I feel this third entity, right? Between the me and you, there's a third come through. And that I can only describe as love or presence or God, And I know I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but it feels like it matters for this moment particularly.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of what you're calling healing vortex versus trauma vortex, do you want to go into that?
Yeah. So there's an interesting thing that our brain does, which is, and it's a survival apparatus, so we don't have to feel bad about it. And I certainly feel this all the time, but Steve Hoskinson of Organic Intelligence calls it the what's wrong attention. And so our brain is primed to notice what is wrong over what is right. It's an evolutionary advantage that kept us alive. As we've evolved, then I think we're in this next stage of our evolution where we're being asked to actually develop other parts of our brain to be just as strong as that, if not stronger. And so it's like lifting weights. if I'm going to move out of the what's wrong attention, I actually have to do some very specific things around my proprioceptive capacity to notice in the very real physicality of my animal body and my nervous system. So one of the first things we do when we want to leave the trauma vortex, which is often connected to imagery and thought. Those are certain channels of our being that we can go into. The healing vortex, for most people, most of the time, unless they're in some war-torn moment, which is very rare for almost all of the population, even very, poverty-strucken places. If you've ever been to India, there's so much joy and healing in the slums of Delhi, right? So for most of us, most of the time, when we orient our being towards the actuality of reality through point A, me, point B being nature, the room I'm sitting in, you as my friend shaking your head, I am getting all of these signals of love, healing, goodness, beauty, kindness, commiseration as I'm seeing you nod. I have to actually train myself, and most of us do, to be able to receive that. It's weightlifting. Because even though I'm receiving all of this, my sensory system isn't set up to receive it, particularly if I've gone through the myriad of trauma we can go through as little beings. And so the healing vortex is actually almost always super readily available. But it doesn't sell products. It doesn't get clicks on Facebook or Instagram. It's the opposite of enticing. It's the opposite. The trauma vortex is seductive. It sucks us in, and it's often about doing, whereas this healing vortex is about being. We can talk about it through the left and the right brain. But when you're a parent, you know this. If your kid comes to you and let's say they got in a fight at school or something, and they come to you and you immediately go, oh, okay, well, let's talk about this fight. Like, what do we need to do to ameliorate this? Tell me all the facts and blah, blah, blah. The kid's just gonna be getting more and more upset, right? Whereas if the first reaction or action is a healing vortex, we enter into that oppositional brain and we say, hey, buddy, that sucks. I so know how that feels. Come here. And that is a different part of our brain than the part that fixes and does and analyzes. And I feel like we've atrophied that part of us in the service of this doing part that is actually motivated by an unconscious trauma response. I think the entire world right now is being activated by unconscious trauma response. And it makes sense. I have a lot of compassion for it because I'm in it, I'm coming out of it, but I have experienced it in myself.
Yeah. In Body Thrive, which is our daily habits course, it takes a year, we find, for people to get into circadian rhythm habits. We're using Dr. Ben Hardy, his book, The Gap and the Gain, that he wrote with Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach. And it sounds really, in some ways similar and in some ways different. In the gap and the gain, the gap is where you're measuring where you want to be. That's your ideal, right? And for a lot of people, right, who don't feel well, it's like feeling good. If you're not in happy relationships, it's like happy relationship, right? Whatever that is. In work, it might be hitting certain targets at work. So you see the ideal, right? The where I want to be. And the striving, like you're saying, in the doing, in the trauma vortex, is the striving towards the ideal. Well, what Dan Sullivan figured out in coaching entrepreneurs at Strategic Coach he first came up with the gap in the game concept about 25 years ago, because he found that certain entrepreneurs and all the people he works with are already successful. They've already made it, right? And then he helps them 10x or 100x. That's his deal at Strategic Coach. So they're already, by any societal measure, they've already done it, right? And what he found was that certain people couldn't get out of gap thinking, which is the measurement of from where you are now to the ideal. Because all you're seeing is the gap from where you are now to all the things that need to be done to get to the ideal. So what he found was that he could retrain some people, not everyone, but most people that were high in openness, which entrepreneurs tend to be, into gain thinking. And we've been doing this for the last 8 weeks in Body Thrive, and it's remarkable, the changes in perspective, like that reflect what you're saying in terms of like it's a different mode of operating your nervous system from. So in gain thinking, you measure from where you were, right? There's still the ideal. The ideal is still the orientation mechanism. Where you are now is still the same. What's changing is how you're measuring. So rather than measuring from where you are now to the ideal, you measure from where you are now to what you've gained, to where you were. Right. And so there's really simple techniques like using a gain journal. And a gain journal is just at the end of the day, like, what are 3 things that, what are 3 things that you gained from the day? What are 3 things that went well? And then you orient the next day. Like, what are 3 things that are so important to you that you want these to be your gains tomorrow, which is very doing oriented. But what we're finding in the community is that measurement shift changes the nervous system. And it puts someone into really assessing. And this was so fascinating the first month of using the book. And we're talking about, a couple hundred people, right, that are actively using this book daily and doing a gain journal and really putting it to the test, is finding that, like, oh, wow, what are my priorities? And that was really big in the first month of like, what is most important to me? And what happened was these endlessly long to-do lists to get to the ideal started to get very, very much, it's like refined into the specific activities that bring the most gain, the most, and this goes right back to soul. It goes right back to purpose. It goes into the not knowing, like when you don't really know, like, what are my priorities? And you have to ask yourself that of like, me as the creator, what am I becoming tomorrow? What is the most important? And what we found a lot was like a lot of things around work priorities got simplified. And a lot of missing pieces around relationship got amplified.
Yeah, it makes me think of also the state versus the content or story. I mean, all of this leads us back to meditation and spiritual life and prayer. It all goes back to getting super clear. It's like when you're a little kid and you want to play with a toy, it's different what you like at age 3 than what you like at age 7. And so for me, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs or people who have been successful in the business world or made a name for themselves, suddenly the old toys don't really serve you anymore.
Right.
You start to really ask the question, like, what is it that I really want?
Yeah.
And, as this man blows the leaves into our garden, for the 8th time today, we have to like really get clearer on the motivating longing behind the longing. Like, I'm to the point where my December 21st solstice longing was, I want to be free from unnecessary fear.
Yeah.
Fear's good, like if a snake's coming or a bad man, but like, I want to be free from unnecessary fear. So if that's my motivation, how do I come into this conversation with you? How do I relate to my dating life? How do I relate to how many people sign up for my school or not? I mean, that's a new one where it's like, oh my God, the economy is weird. What's going on? Like, is that if that is my true longing, is to know that level of freedom. Now I'm orienting my day a little differently.
Yeah. Mine is around this. It's the push of time. I love this. I love this from Alan Watts, the Alan Watts, who I think died the year I was born. Time is a social institution, not a physical reality. And I'm like, okay, so why do I push projects forward? Like, why do I always feel like I want more done? Right? Just that. And I'm super ambitious. I think I'm a lot more ambitious than most people, and that's something I've grappled with, is like, I'm comfortable with my ambition. Right. And so I've got like 3 books going at once right now. Like, it's a lot, and my team and this and that. And it's like, it's all working, right? It's all working. In my nervous system, there's that evolutionary impulse is stronger than the ground of being, right? And it's like, how do I shift that relationship? And that's what I find. That was like for me in this solstice in this time. And I'm doing a lot, like, it's really cold, wintry here. It's gorgeous, white. It's just snowing all the time. And I go out early and late. So I go out in the dark in the snow and no one's out, right? And it's just dark and white at the same time, right? And it's that like getting into that ground zero, like getting down into that nothingness, right? That's why I like to be out in the dark, in the snow, in the cold, right? Like not a sustainable environment, but it's a super awake environment. Like cold wakes you up, and yogis have used cold forever because they know that like cold wakes you up, whereas warmth puts you to sleep, right? And so in that, it's like, can I readjust to like, wait, right, time is a social reality. Like even what it is I'm trying to do in time, what happens when I break out of that and break into like what is a more natural, where there's no pushy energy, and just allow the process to happen. And I keep finding, especially with this book on wild habits, where I'm trying to write for someone that has like a mix of symptoms and has chronic inflammation, which is, you know, everybody at this point, as far as I can tell, either too much on the mind or too much in the body. Like it's just the nature of now. Is it's like, how does that person get some of these sort of outrageous habits, like that are free and available, and they don't have to go buy anything to do any of them, and they can feel way better? And it's like, that work is so important to do. I want to do all the research on it, so I really understand, not all the research, but as much as I possibly can, and get it out fast so that it's usable. And then it's like that rushing, right? Of like, how do I get it?
You know what comes to mind as I hear you? It's the difference, it's the capacity, it's like the purpose of spiritual life is to be able to have discernment. What is me and what isn't, and what is serving dharma and satyakama and what's not. And as you're talking, and the little bit that I do know you, and I mirror, you and I have a lot of similarities in the realm of ambition, right? It's like the ability to distinguish what is the creative force of the goddess that is like pure generative creativity, which you have a ton of, and so do I, and so do many of ours, right? And what can I do to be yoga, like separate everything that's getting in the way of my chakras being so fully full of her so that she can create through me, right? To be able to honor that and like be like, hell yeah, I'm writing a comic book about peeing and drinking it. Like that's what she wants to do, and it's weird. I love that about you, right? And then the other side, the shadow, which is what Jung calls the deep swamp, which there's shit pushing on our creativity that's pure and golden and divine goddess. There's stuff pushing on her that is so whack, that's like we're so unaware of. I mean, I've been doing this strong spiritual practice for 20 years, and I'm telling you, this week I had this like complete, I'm basically like low key on like, I don't take ayahuasca, but I'm basically, my lifestyle is such that I'm like on a low key ayahuasca journey every day. The stuff that's coming through, that's underneath, that's pushing on some of my ambition, and not all of it, right? It's so unknown. That's why the best definition of yoga is making the unconscious conscious. And it's so mind-blowing that when it comes through, there's no response except humility, right? Oh my God, here's why I've been doing this part of it, right? And the end result is like Buddhism 101. It's you become a bodhisattva. You must help others. You have so much compassion for the way in which even someone like a Donald Trump, right? Like when you get into the murky,
totally,
there's something pushing on that. And so for me, I'm just trying to understand, well, why do I want to write another book? And why do I want to make Shakti school even better? And why do I want to get in a relationship with a man? And, you know, why? And being able to parse out, I think that's the journey, and it's challenging. I think we have this tendency to, on at least on what I read on Instagram, of being like, hashtag self-care, hashtag not doing is the new doing. And it's just like, dude, why do we always have to go to these extremes? It's the yin and the yang, you know? Like I love that you're such a prolific creatrix, you know? And I want you to be like that. And the universe wants you to be like that. And for me, it's just really getting clear on the deeper longing for me sitting here with you today, Kate, is I want to feel fucking safe to
Mm,
just be in this body. And when I feel safe, and this is not just me, it's all of our nervous systems, when we feel safe to be exactly who we are, like the dorky velveteen rabbits that we are,
yeah.
all the inflammation goes down.
Yeah.
All things in the body start to work when the nervous system just feels this basic equilibrium that I don't think a lot of people have right now. And then
Yeah.
you get chronic health stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen to that. Yeah. And I think what I'm finding now is it's like I can see, and I think the gain journal is helping. It's just that breaking down of, wait, I love what I'm doing. So when that, and it's an energetic, right? I feel it in the nerves. I feel it in the nervous system. And it's like this old operating system. It's that whole time as a social institution. Like there's deadlines and all this. And it doesn't fucking matter because like I'm already sharing everything I'm learning with my community in real time. So there's no gap, right? To transmission and whatever the Shakti is doing, it's doing. So then there's all these false deadlines. But what I am finding is useful is the handing, like even, just to relate it back to you and safety, right? It's like you are safe, right? And it's that remembering. It's that like, wait, my nervous system is totally entrained to feel unsafe, right? And then you remember and you're like, oh, all I have to do is exhale. Like all I have to do is expand. All I have to do is be silent. All I have to do is be grateful. All I have to do is be alone, right? Like these things that, or commune or whatever. It's like that, oh, 100 times a day. Like,
Times
oh,
like I can't remember what spiritual teacher said this, like a drowning man looking for breath is how much we have to long for that spiritual repair.
yeah,
At the end of the day, no matter how much therapy or trauma release or yoga we do, at the end of the day, we're relational creatures created from the first time our cell replicated through relationship. And the healing on a big scale has to come through a relating, whether it be me relating to you if you and I need a repair as a friendship,
yeah,
me to the divine creator, which, the whole of the Yoga Sutras basically is like, here, do all this crazy shit, do Wim Hof, do breathing, do herbs, do this, do that, right? All mantra, yantra, blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
Yoga, chakra yoga, blah, 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 karma yoga, on and on and on. And then at the end, it's like, or
Or,
forget all that and just surrender your heart to the divine.
yeah.
And it's like, why aren't we talking? I'm getting chill bumps. Like, why aren't we talking about that as much as breath work, as much as asana, as much as whatever the hell we're learning in all of these different
I think it's because people can't do it that haven't done the practices. Because you and I have done practices for a very long time.
Yeah,
So the question is, can you skip that step?
I don't know. That's a really good question.
I mean, and it's totally worth exploring. And some people might be able to, but
No.
others, like I even noticed because I did Wim Hof breathing this morning, and I'm like, oh my God, it works every time. It works every time. Every time. It cracks my code.
I think the answer is it's super helpful. Like what the ancient teachings say is pranayama is the thing that makes the veils that block your light go away. And like, my God, like, one of the things I'm working with is just, I'm doing a lot of subtle work because I've already done all the dense work, right? And the subtle work of just bringing my attention all the time in and down the back of my spine, this sort of dragon tiger kriya it's called, and it's all about getting energy to move down and down, which is the opposite of what I was taught in my, kundalini needs to move up and out like some dude ejaculating. It's like, nah, dog, like the way women get off is we go in and down and then we recycle it, and we go in and down and then we recycle it, and yeah, it moves up, but I can move up so fast. And our society is all about up and out, up and out. But to your point, I love the technologies. I'm such a like, I think Ayurveda is like the original biohack. But at the same time, if we only get lost and caught in the tech and don't even have the framework for the ultimate,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Context, right? It's like yeah, totally. Totally. I mean, that's what I feel like I've been in and with all this inflammation and chronic disease research. It's like all piecemeal, it's all parcel, just like the practices. It's like all over the place, and it's just missing the main vein. It's just missing the like, wait, this is so easy. This is so easy.
It is actually super easy. Like one of the things that blows my mind, like in Shakti school, what I'll have the ladies do, and everyone's like, oh, what is this golden magic you are prescribing? And let me tell you what it is. It's, hey, like put your hand on your heart. It's Laya yoga, right? Like put your hand on your heart. And now I want you to remember a time in your life where you felt so much love. Like, and I always talk about baby Jack, my nephew, and I talk about, your pet or a moment with nature. And don't pick some moment where some dude hurt your feelings later. Like pick a pure moment of tenderness and love and sweetness, and then get it really rich in your body. And if you lose your way, come back, like keep coming. That's the healing vortex.
Yeah.
Any human off the street with no yoga training, if you have them do that for 60 to 90 seconds, their physiology immediately shifts into heart rate variability goes up. All of these markers for health and lowering of inflammation come online. It's so freaking simple, Kate, but my God, I mean, I'm like a professional. I have no children. Like this is my whole job, and I have to do it 20 times a day, right? To counteract the trauma vortex, which is a new way of saying karma. Trauma, there's trauma capital T if something really gnarly happens. Most of us are dealing with trauma lowercase t, which is karma, bad, negative karma.
It's the same with inflammation. It's the same with acute inflammation versus chronic inflammation.
Right.
It's the same. Like even when people are having acute inflammation, if there's underlying chronic inflammation, in my book, it still counts as chronic. It still counts as chronic because that's what's creating the problem. Because if you have someone without ama, without toxicity, without their body just dealing with backlog, processing backlog, no availability for now, no availability for real potentiality in future, right? It's just processing backlog. And then you put something like SARS-CoV-2 on it, you're going to get an acute inflammation, but that's not the problem because someone without that backlog is not going to have the same response, right? They're going to have acute inflammation, which is like acute trauma, which is like a massive disruption. And then hopefully a readjustment and an incorporation, a reincorporation, right? Of like, what is this corporeal body now, given the past experience? So yeah, different language, right? Same exact thing, but totally different language for it. So where did you want to go with masculine versus feminine? Was that part of it, like the up and out and the down and in?
Well, I think it's not versus, it's more like this. I keep coming back to the yin and the yang symbol, or the Shiva Shakti Yabya. It's this way in which I try to approach everything lately. I'm sure you get this too, when students come to Shakti school, they want to know what they should do and they want to know the right way. And I'm the same way. I'm like, I paid for this. What do I do to feel better?
Yeah. Tell me what to do. Fix me.
Don't worry, we will. We're very bossy, and we love protocols and we love research and science and blah blah blah. But like the feminine is the field in which the protocols are introduced, and I'm currently extrapolating that out into the realm of spiritual practice and healing and meditative work, which is way more subtle, but it's the same realm. And that feminine is this place where I'm doing what I need to do on the masculine realm, right? Breath work, to-do list, eating the right foods, etc., working out, yoga, whatever, right? But the field is the realm of, it's going to sound a little cheesy, love and gratitude. And so it's if that really isn't the place in which I'm planting all these seeds of doing, the end results are really paltry. And then there's a lot of frustration. The feminine realm takes time. It's slow by nature. It is. And so this is also a very important realm called the intuition. And if you have chronic inflammation, it is so much more challenging to access because on the chakra level, we're so blocked, and we tend to like get caught in one chakra when we're inflamed. We really do. And many of us are chronically caught up in this one, the head. And so, you know, the feminine in just the physiology is about moving our energy in and down our pelvis and legs. It sounds so simple.
Oh my gosh, it's so not. Like, I'm doing this, we're doing a lot of downhill skiing, and I'm like, if I can't feel my psoas when I'm skiing, like if I can't get in there, if I can't draw, you know, if I can't get energy to move down through even through the front body, down through my knee, like, it's like, no, I don't know what you're doing, but that's not it.
Can we do it when we're, you know, try this on for size, those of you out there that are single, go on a date, okay? When I go out on dates, I am not out on a date. I am doing pranayama. I go and sit at the coffee shop. I am pouring my loving attention down my pelvis and legs. And I keep doing that. And then once I get that flow, and I'm doing it a little bit as I'm talking to you, Kate, as I'm get that flow, then I open up the channel for the mama to come up inside of me. And then I let the energy move up and in and up and in only to my belly. Okay, so I'm sitting there with this pulsation basically in my pussy, right? Here's the side effect. And this is why girls, women out there listening, y'all better do this, because here's what begins to happen. You start to become a vortex of sex, and that you also do not need him or her. It doesn't matter, right? Sex, right? But I'm going to say man and woman. You don't need him. You're so full and you're so connected. And guess what? I don't really say as much, if anything. In fact, I've gone on dates where they weren't people I would have a second date with, but I did that the whole time, Kate. And at the end of the date, they haven't asked me one question. They've just talked at me the whole time. And the guy's like, oh my God, you're amazing. Incredible. Can I go out with you again? And I'm just, yes, because no, you cannot, but he can feel feminine.
Oh my gosh, you've got to watch this video with Harry Matadine. I'm doing a live with him next week. It's on the Philosopher's Stone, which is his urine therapy forum, and he talks about swishing aged urine 5 times and basically doing the equivalent in the masculine.
Okay, so swishing it in your mouth?
Yeah.
Well, how is
this going to come up? So this is like a vodka bottle. This is a nice, but that's aged urine, so that I can swish while I work. But it's the same concept of like, you're in charge of getting yourself off. Don't need another person for that, because if you do, it's codependence.
And it's okay to get off with someone else. You know, that's the time.
And it's okay to get off with someone else, but like, it's like baseline. It's like that baseline. It's like when we need the guru around to meditate.
No bueno. Yeah. You know, what I continue to be amazed by, the goddess is such a little wily minx that when we are approximating truth, it feels oppositional.
Yeah.
How can I be so in my own being, so connected vertically to the divine and the earth below me, and be in a horizontal relationship with you, and actually need to be in a horizontal relationship with you, so I'm not some bad Buddhist boyfriend that's just like meditating in a cave, like thinking he's becoming enlightened when really he's just has avoidant attachment issues that he has never dealt with.
That's good. That's juicy. So I want to come back to, because I feel like I sort of blew off in the beginning, the religious traditions that you wanted to bring in. Well, and actually, before we go there, I want to talk about what we just talked about with the koshas, because I made this map. It was sort of one of these things that I'm pretty spontaneous in terms of me and my pad and drawing these illustrations. And I was trying to teach like what chronic inflammation does to the koshas. And it was basically like, like the three main thing, like the first three the most dense koshas, the physical body or food body, the energy body, and the mind body, like they just get symptoms, like symptoms, right? And it all just looks kind of like blah. It's a lot of like, I mean, some of it's angry blah, but there's still this like stuff in the way. And then basically what I wrote was that, it's like in the intuitive body and in the spirit body, it's just blocked. Like it's just not accessible. It's just blocked. There's just no, and that's where, and I just want to tie that back to why, it's like why the first three padas of the Yoga Sutras are like practice, is it's like unblock it. And in Wild Habits, I feel like it's a lot easier than the Yoga Sutras. It's like the practices right now are actually, they're really easy. It's so much more about less. I like Cal Newport, do less, do better, know why. He's the guy that wrote Digital Minimalism, and he wrote Deep Work, and he's a professor at MIT. And like, I don't know how he has time to write books and be a professor at MIT, but it's like that whole thing of like, do less, do better, know why. Just like, that's to me so much of what unblocks or gets us out of the head and back to the heart and back to the second chakra, right? Like that gets us into, wait, what matters? How do I orient towards meaning? What is meaning for me? What are traditions for me? Like what, and I'll transition a little bit into like into the religious tradition, because I had this conversation with my sister, and this was the first, I think this was the first it was my first holiday in the United States that I didn't have my extended family. And so it was me and my daughter and my husband. And like it was awesome because there was no real expectations of what we were going to do. So we were totally free in the world of spontaneity. Like, how do we want to do this? What do we want to do? And so I was talking with my sister after, and she was experiencing the same thing, but we both felt out of sync with the materialism around. It's like where capitalism usurped religious tradition is what I feel like what we're acting out now. So it's like when it's Valentine's Day, you buy stuff, you buy flowers and you buy candy and you buy Valentine's. When it's Easter, you buy stuff for Easter baskets and Easter cards. And when it's, and it's just like, it's just totally, these traditions are usurped by capitalism. And I think Christmas is, to me, just the most kind of blatantly outrageous expression of that, where it's like, what are we celebrating? Especially those of us who might not be Christian, but are usurped by a Christian dominated culture, where even like our days off, our vacations, like it's all in the skies and in the sort of the gift. And the other thing that happened, I'll just bring this out. It's like, I'm pretty pitta and I'm working on these books and loving the deep white and the deep darkness. And just the color red is so everywhere in Christmas. And I just felt like, I don't get this. Like, I get the blood of red, right? But just that like, wait, the colors are off here. Like what I was feeling was like, I want pale blue. I want the light of the sky in the winter. Like I want earth-based rituals. I just want pine cones. I don't need cut down trees. I don't need to decorate with anything synthetic. Like I don't need artificial light. I just need a candle. Like it's just such a deep desire for, to me, what was the religious tradition, like what was the pagan tradition before, what was the traditions around the time of darkness and the time of light. And I just felt like, oh my gosh, I really need to be careful. I have a teenager, it's like, I need to really pay attention to what is coming through intuition, and like, what are my earth-based rituals? If that is my spirituality, is like earth-based spirituality.
Well, we're being called to recreate old and create new. And if you look at the original meaning of the word Christ, it means to be anointed. And Christ, who is one of my main avatars that I work with daily, right? I'm being called, like you're being called to urine therapy. I'm being called to Christ and to reappropriate something that was so raped and stolen as per your sense. It's not about artificial light or Christmas presents. It's a deeper mourning of the loss, the great, great loss of the original meaning of Christianity and Christ, even though you may not be a Christian. And this is
Yeah.
happening throughout all religions. If you read the actual words of Christ, especially if you read into the Gnostic text of Christ,
Mm.
continually asks us to repent over and over and over again. And I grew up Southern Baptist. So when I hear that word, I literally used to cringe, like, oh God, here we go again with the Christian guilt. But if you look at the Greek original Aramaic, metanoia means, repentance means
Mm.
the renewal of your mind through accessing the higher mind. I mean, like hardcore yogi. So if Christmas is actually a celebration of Christ, what it means is that Christmas, the time of the greatest amount of darkness on the planet, is actually the time when we need to cultivate the most amount of renewal of our mind. And this is so related to what we were talking about, trauma vortex versus healing vortex.
Yeah.
Renewing our mind doesn't mean going and taking a bath and like feeling a little more calm. No, it means that you have your ancient samskaric way of seeing, being, and thinking radically altered to a new vision. And to me, that is the message of Christ. It's the message of Christmas. And yet I pieced out. Like I love my family so much, but I had this intuitive hit. You need to go and be with your spirit family, your mentor, and your nature here in Hawaii. I had the ability to do that, and I got here, and we created our own ritual, and it involved swimming with turtles. And you could be like, oh, F you, Katie Silcox, swimming with turtles. You can do this no matter where you are. You can create new rituals.
Yeah.
Swam with turtles. We made food based on our heart's nostalgic memory of our grandmothers. We did all of our own thing, right? We went on hikes. We were very physical. And at the end of this, we did this amazing prayer and ritual around all of this greenery and pine cones. To your point, like we had to recreate this. My whole family ended up getting COVID, most of them vaccinated just for posterity. And so it just felt like an escape. I had this beautiful escape from that. Not that I, may not get it myself.
Well, right.
Like we're all like, I'm not dodging COVID. Like if I'm
Right.
getting,
Yeah. And that's, to me, that's that, it's like that edge. It's like that noticing. That's the intuitive body. That's the awake intuitive body. It's saying like, wait, something's dated. Something's of the past. It's not of the present. It's not of the future. Right. And then something's of the past, and it is of the present, and it is of the future. And that's Tejas, right? It's like, that's the discernment. And that the deep, for those in the Northern Hemisphere, like that deep darkness is so, that's what it's fostering in human consciousness. Like that's why I'm skiing in the dark, right? Like that's why I'm out in the cold and the dark, because it's like that I can feel it there. I get it there, right? And it's like in the artificial light, and it's disconnected. There's too much noise. There's too much noise in the intuitive body. There's too much noise in the spirit. Like I can't orient towards that. I wanted to bring up too, like have you read the Gospel According to Jesus by Stephen Mitchell? Stephen Mitchell's married to Byron Katie. And he's taken a lot of the old texts. He rewrote Gilgamesh. He's like taken a lot of he's got some wild books on Taoism as well. But I learned so much from the gospel, because all he did was he got, just basically he gets deep into ancient texts and he pulls out what he thinks is the most authentic version of that. And so he just took out direct teachings from Christ and wrote the Gospel According to Jesus. And anyways, I think you might enjoy it if you like Stephen.
I just wrote that down. I'm obsessed right
Oh, it's so good. I listened to it. I was telling Winston, I'm like, I need to listen to it again right now because I feel so disconnected from the rituals that are demonstrated in modern culture. Like I'm just, and I'm frustrated. I think I'm frustrated, honestly, with like the Christians not doing a better job in controlling capitalism. And I don't know how they would. It's like I'm frustrated with pharmaceutical companies. I'm frustrated with the food industry. I'm frustrated with Christians and their capitalist tradition, or that's like, you know, taking over an earth-based rituals. And it's so easy to point fingers, right? And so instead, what I'm doing is it's like, what is real? Like what is trying to happen here? How do humans cycle through time and cycle through the earth-based rhythms of time, and what is coming through the intuitive body and the spiritual body in the season of, like, again, at solstice or just past solstice? Because I find the energy ripens and then it continues, right? Where it's like, oh, now we can really celebrate darkness because like all that got out of the way. So now it's like, what is the darkness insulating? Well, it's insulating the light, and the light is the truth, and the light is the intuition. And it's like, how can that really come through? Well, I better go into the dark.
And what is the dark? I mean, yeah, it's titrate it. You know, what I was thinking as you were talking too is this, yes, and both, and thinking about our routines, and that's so important. And when we were talking about chronic inflammation, going back to that for a moment,
Yeah.
you are so dead right. If your physicality and your prana and your mind are full of junk, it is virtually impossible to access higher states. And what I've found, despite my staggering own experience of growing up in an inflamed little child that got a lot of medication and had a wrecked gut by the age of 20, like, also we need to be pouring the light of spirit into the body as we are dealing with all of the vicissitudes of chronic inflammation, which is the root of so much of our issue right now. So no matter how chronically inflamed we are, there is always a third entity that is outside of the realm of our own mind. That is interesting to me, because that does not give a shit how inflamed you are, how traumatized you
Yeah.
are. There is an invitation where
Yeah.
we become feminine, which is empty vessel, holy cup. I will let this so pour through me. It has come to me and come through me at the most inflamed, messed up, traumatized moments of my life, right? And so, like, the deal is, though, that's not me. I mean, we could say it is also me, but like, it's not me. It is not my energy. It is not my karma. It is not my thought pattern. It is not Katie's personality. There is something that I have to open myself. And in fact, the original Christian mantra for this practice is Ma Ra Na Ta. It means, come, Lord, come inside of me.
Yeah.
The Hindu tradition says, if you take one step towards God, and that's that miracle moment of surrendering the ego, God will take 1,000 towards you running. You know, but God respects us so much, Kate, that she will not enter unless we invite. And so I just hope anyone out there listening, because I've dealt with so much trauma and inflammation and gut issues and the whole gamut, I mean, still dealing with. But I don't want anyone to think, oh, I'm so inflamed, forget about intuition and higher mind and spirit, because it's always occurring concurrently. The more we get the ancient trauma and lineage trauma out of the way, the more we get the chronic inflammation down through diet and lifestyle, it is going to supercharge your capacity to feel this holy golden love that's always available. And at the same time, inviting in this holy golden love that's always available is going to ameliorate all the chronic worldly. You know, it's just like we need both.
Yeah. Well, and it's just the desire to, I mean, I just keep coming down to, it's like, it's the desire to feel better is the only motivation needed. Right. It's just honoring that.
And moving energy to, like, I loved what you said, like, my mentor Crystal has on her refrigerator, move energy towards the possibility of your
Yeah.
awakening.
Yeah.
Move your energy, start to actually move energy towards the possibility of chronic inflammation disappearing on the planet. Move energy towards
Yeah.
the possibility of the eradication of coronavirus. Move energy towards, like the shamans say, we have to dream in this new vision. And my God, Kate,
Yeah.
every on Instagram, I'm a HSP. I'm highly sensitive. I get on Instagram, I like look at Dave Asprey's, look at this. I'm like, fuck. It's like, and I love Dave, but like
Yeah.
vision of the New York Times and Fox News, it's just like not the holy vision that we need to be calling in without bypassing the fact that, my half my family has COVID right now. It sucks. Like it's a real thing and it sucks, right? But like I know for me, I have to start moving in this new vision or we're not going to get there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm right. And I think I'm in right. So the Wild Habits book for me came out of the P book of like, how do I put this in context? And then the Wild Habits brought me way deeper into chronic inflammation research. So that's been a pretty wild, it's been a pretty wild ride in terms of what we know. But what it all comes down to, like all the, in terms of calling in the brighter future, it's all free and simple. It's not techno driven. It's not complicated. It's not made in a laboratory. It's none of that. It's understanding that like even our physiologies and I mean, it's interesting when you hear like that whole third entity calling in, right? It's like in many ways, if we start to understand that like the microbiome, which is the bacteria and the virome, right? They call the virome in scientific literature, they call it the dark matter of the body. They don't know it. It's so hard to map the genome of the virome because it's so tiny and it's so complex. It basically mirrors what's on Earth, right? So it's like, but we know the virome, which is other than, like a lot of people think like, oh no, wait, who the human is, that's the human DNA. And then there's the biome DNA, and then there's the virome DNA, and the virome DNA is like this big, and the human DNA is like this big. So we don't even know what we are, right? Like that third entity, as far as we understand, on the physiological, on the physical body level, who we are is more other than self. And if we optimize for other, if we optimize for the greater, right? So you could say the greater is God. You could say, I could say, well, the greater in the body on the physiological level is the microbiome. Because if your microbiomes are unhealthy, and there's a different microbiome, they do this by species, in your mouth versus in your colon. So your colon microbiome are bacteria mostly and viruses mostly that prefer an anaerobic environment versus your mouth, which is totally cool with an aerobic environment because it can, get oxygen, right? Unlike your colon, unlike your lungs, your skin, right? So all the different areas of the body are all these different systems. Ohms is like homes, as far as I can tell, homes of a group of species that's not your human DNA. So that's the other. If you optimize for God, saying that the other's God, saying that other's the microbiome and the virome, if you optimize for that, this is where it gets totally nuts. Okay.
Okay, optimize for God. I love that.
Right? Like start to see other as self, like teaching of Christ, like see other as self, right? It's like, that's it. See the bacteria, like in the 1960s, bacteria was bad. Right now, most humans on the planet think virome is bad. But what we know from the level of the literature is that you don't get a healthy immune system without a highly functional virome to feed the biome. So like the virome's like the base level, it feeds the biome because the bacteria need the viruses to activate to produce even things like serotonin or oxytocin or that sort of stuff that y'all want to feel good, right? So the virome feeds the biome, feeds the nervous system, feeds the immune system. So it's all other. It's all optimizing for the ecosystem. It's optimizing for the ecology. If we look at human relationships, it's optimizing for the community, for the individual to thrive. Like that's how the whole thing's designed and shot through. So I think the more we get that of like, how do I nourish that which is nourishing me? It's like that shift. Oh my gosh, right?
How do I nourish that which is nourishing me? That is a succinct way of describing the meaning of the word worship. You worship God, you because that's the thing that's worshiping you.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the whole thing's healthy. So this is what I figured out, just to close on the COVID part. So if you're healthy and you have fairly low chronic inflammation, right? You have low inflammation, or in Ayurveda, we would say you've cleared your ama, or you maybe never had ama. You're maybe one of the lucky few that is alive today that didn't grow up on something akin to a standard American diet and pharmaceuticals, and you don't have ama. So you get exposure, right? You get exposure, you get the virus. And we're made to optimize for the virome. Like the virome loves diversity, right? Like that's the name of the game, is like more, it's like diets right now. A lot of the literature and nutrition is like, well, more nutrient, more phyto diversity means healthy, right? So the virome's optimized for diversity. So you get exposure and your body's like, oh, I have a virus. And the virus starts to do what viruses do, which is replicate, right? And the body starts to do, the healthy immune system does what it does, which is like creates antibodies, because it's like, what the hell is this? It creates acute inflammation. It's like, let's figure out what this is. Let's go check it out. Let's tag it, right? And then let's create antibodies for it. The virus and the antibodies show up in the pee and the poop really quick, right? That's how we diagnose if someone has COVID, is you can do blood, you can do nasal swab, you can do pee, you can do poop. So it comes out in there. So then if you upcycle the pee, you're upcycling both the antibodies and the virus, and you're teaching the body that it's not dangerous. So then it adapts. And now it's more of other is me, more of out there is within, right? I was interviewing this guy, Emerin Mayer, who's Dr. Mayer is the head of medicine at UCLA. And he was saying that like, we're only going to see more. Everyone who knows viruses knows that like the more humans exploit environments, right? The more we bring up viruses, the more we take viruses from the animal and plant realm into the human body. So there's only going to be more. So how do I make more other me? Right? That's kind of where I've landed.
We are in the great unknown, and I think that it makes sense to me that nature's producing what she produces when things are not looking good. The first thing that comes into the soil is fungus, virus, that virus and fungus, like to your point, that's the way that the microbiome is improved.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we could get in deep on that. But yeah, I'm moving most of my energy into the simplicity of daily routines and using this diamond opportunity of my life to become free. And the more you do that, I think the more it's easier for me to see the greater eagle eye vision that's happening despite the banana sandwich idiocy of the the things that are going on in our world. I mean, I think about our friend Scott Blossom said on one of my podcasts, goddess corona, like chopping off our heads. And I think that I'm really trying to see that as this opportunity where every single system I and many have kind of lost our faith in, and that's okay, because the more we aren't reliant upon these outer systems, which would be so nice in the golden era when we could rely on them, right? It's not like a bad thing. We should have systems in place for our culture that we love and feel connected to and rely on them. We don't, and so really, and I do think that they're full of people doing their best. I don't believe that they're full of these horrific beings that are just, have these horrible intentions. My journey right now is to know the only thing that I can trust is inside of me and all around me. And that requires a mourning, Kate, that I see in you too, where we have elder rage. Why do I have to create my freaking Christmas holiday new tradition? Like, there's an elder rage in the sense that many of us youngsters like you and I, who are still quite young, are being forced into positions of leadership around tradition because our elders did not gift it to us. And we can love them and forgive them. But, I spent the morning on the phone with my mom, like, getting her set up for what she needs to deal with COVID. And I don't know if the same would be true that she could do that for me. And it's not out of not loving me.
Yeah.
It's like the roles have kind of reversed. The elders are now younger. And so I can just only hope that I continue, and that we continue to get the support that we need from the elders that do exist on the planet, but more because they're very, very few true elders, but to get it from the spirit realm where it's in limitless supply. And I'm getting chill bumps because we're in Kali Yuga, and that is when we can access this light better than any other time.
Yeah.
It's now. It's like because we're desperate. Like the last thing I want to say, Kate, this is really important. We think that we're in this crazy time that no one's ever gone through before. Humans have gone through plagues and pandemics. Look at it in the Greek literature. Look at it. It's in the Iliad, the Odyssey. It's in the Bible. I'm sure if I studied other traditions, it's everywhere. Humans have been going through plagues and pandemics all of the time. And what we can see from history, so we may end on some hope, is that there tends to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. We are at the end of the beginning. We're entering into this middle period where we start to feel, like they did a new study that like 7 out of 10 Americans don't give a shit about COVID anymore. Like that's a lot of people that are over it.
Yeah.
That marks the beginning of the middle period. Then we get to the end, which is the Roaring 20s. It's marked by these periods of great celebration and dancing in the streets. I don't think people care what's going on in the economy if we could just hug and party and be together, right? And I just really feel like we're entering into that next period, even though, Omni Unicorn, whatever we want to call it, they're going to be endless variants, to your point. And so it just really...
And next viruses. Yeah. Amen. I want to just something that you said, trust nothing you haven't verified for yourself. That's Terrence McKenna, the big psychedelic guru, right? And it just speaks to that, like that re-empowerment of self that comes from a lot of confusion and the chaos of systems changing.
Yeah, it's very chaotic.
Yeah. But then the self speaks truth. And so thanks, Katie. Great to have you here on the Yoga Healer Show. Anything you want to mention in closing? You good?
I mean, just that we're starting a program January 12th. It's a year-long adventure with us. And we'd love to have you. And also watch in your own being where you go into chaos and the opposite, which is rigidity. And to just, try to find that place in the middle of chaos and rigidity. That's the juicy center. And that place, like even in pandemics, even in inflation, even in political turmoil, we can actually use a Kate Stillman word. We can thrive even in these weird times.
Oh, I love that. I just want to bring in one of the teachings I heard about the yin yang symbol that I really liked was that, just to speak to what you're saying, is that the line between the dark and the light, right? That line between the two parts, that's the way, right? The pulsation of the opposites is the way.
Thank you so much. I'm obsessed with the yin and yang. My students will tell you, I mention in every single class, like any question, I'm like, well, let's remember the yin and the yang. I've never known the meaning of the center line. That's so, because
you've got chaos and order, right? You've got chaos and order, and then the way is in the middle. It's exactly what you just described. Why
is it squiggly and not straight down? Is it
because that's the pulsation of Shakti, right?
And it's almost like just when you think you know where she's going, she shapeshifts.
Yeah, the flow. Yeah, totally. Because the way is not a straight line.
Right. I love it. Thank you. Thank you for that. I could talk to you for days, Kate. Like, dude, we're just like two weirdos cut from similar cloth.
Totally. Yeah, I freak out all my neighbors. Okay, so little COVID tip for the fam. Pee, put it in a little eyedropper bottle, and then just a couple drops under the tongue.
Okay.
That's it. Because then she'll upcycle antibodies, faster recovery.
Oh, for the family. Thank you.
for the fam. I mean, it might be too out there, but that's where people start.
Kate, I already told my mom about you and this conversation we had privately, and she was like, "Well, honey, I will put it all over my face, but I don't know if I can drink it." Like I got her on the skin. She was like, "Well, that makes sense."
Perfect. Have her do her lips and some will get in her mouth.
She felt so bad though with COVID. I think she'd be like, 2 drops, all right,
Yeah, totally. Totally. I'm so curious about dosage. We'll talk more about that on your podcast.
Coming on my podcast next.
Okay. Love you, lady.
Thank you so much. Been a pleasure.